What's up, guys? Welcome back to the LTL Podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
and this is going to be our first official regular season video or podcast this year. This is going to be our season standings predictions. The season is right around the corner, actually. I believe it starts next week.
I think it's either next week or the week after, yeah.
And so at this point, in preseason, we have a decent idea of who's making the rosters, all the different teams and stuff like that. So I guess before we start, is there anything about preseason that's kind of stood out to you? Maybe you want to talk about the Rangers a little bit. I'm sure you've caught a couple of their games. Just anything that stood out to you just in general?
To be honest, I haven't really watched a ton of preseason just because, I guess, I don't know, I've just been waiting for the regular season to start. I've never really watched preseason much to begin with. And the Rangers had some question marks they needed to answer in preseason, but it wasn't nearly as many as maybe years past.
Did
'Cause a lot of the moves they made in the off season kind of signaled the direction they were going.
did we ever get an update about Ryan Reeves?
I don't think so. I looked, I couldn't find anything, so.
All right, so that's something we'll just keep an eye on, I guess, going into the regular season. But we'll just jump into it then, and we'll start out west, and then we'll come home, since we are all the way on the East Coast ourselves. So we'll start all the way out west, and I think it's probably the weakest division, and B, the easiest one to kind of make predictions about. We'll start in the Pacific Division. So my standings predictions, I have the top three teams that get the playoff spots as the Golden Knights in first, Oilers in second, and the Canucks at third. I have the Pacific taking none of the wild cards, so I have both wild cards going to the Central, which means all of these following teams miss out on the playoffs. The Flames at fourth, the Kings at fifth, Kraken at sixth, Ducks at seventh, and the Sharks at eighth. So what are your predictions for the standings? And then we'll kind of get into some of the teams here, and we'll talk about what's going on in this division.
I think mine are pretty similar to yours with the way that I don't think any of the California teams are making the playoffs, and it's really kind of a toss up in what order they finish, in my opinion. I mean, LA is probably the best of the three, but they really could finish in any order from 6 through 8. I don't think the Kraken are really going to be all that great in their inaugural season, and this isn't I'm not saying this the same way I was talking about the Vegas Golden Knights. Whereas, the Golden Knights actually had some good players available to them. I feel like this time GMs really did a good job of only letting, expendable pieces go or guys that they could replace fairly easily. So, I don't see Seattle being all that big of a contender. And, yeah, I agree with your top three. I don't know if I agree with the order so much, but, I mean, Vegas, Edmonton, and Vancouver pretty, in my opinion, the most complete teams. I mean, Calgary could make the playoffs and squeak a wild card if they get lucky, but there's just so many question marks with Calgary, and they're just so inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, this division I really isn't great, honestly. It's kind of a doormat division, in my opinion, if you really want my honest opinion about it. Okay, yeah, LA made some moves this offseason. They bought in some pieces like Victor Arvidsson, chief among them, to kind of try to push the pace and maybe get something out of the last remaining years of Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick. And, they've made some moves. Obviously, they're the ones that end up signing Philip Deneau. It's just... It's not enough, I don't think, to kind of overcome the mediocrity of the rest of the roster, combined with the fact that their young players are still developing, Quentin Byfield is still very much a project, which, I mean, he's a young center in the NHL. They're always going to be a project, so...
He's, 19 years old, right?
Yeah, so I don't see the moves that they've made being enough to kind of push the pace. The Kraken have really, really good goaltending, actually. Funnily enough, they might have the best 1-2 punch in this entire division, arguably, but I just think that there's not enough scoring on that roster, and that was kind of by design. It took a lot of middle six players. Really the only goal scorer on the roster is Jordan Eberle, and I don't think the roster's bad. It's just a lot of middle middle of the pack kind of players combined with a lot of younger guys. And I just don't know that they're going to score enough to overcome their issues, especially when you're facing teams like the Oilers, who are all about goal scoring.
It's all offense all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, my position of the Oilers as second in this division is not really indicative of how good I think they really are, because they still haven't answered any of the questions I have for them as far as playoff contingency is concerned. They're still super soft and have a really weak underbelly in their goaltending and defense, but regular season goal scoring tends to be the thing that matters the most, you would say. And, as far as the Canucks are concerned, they made a lot of moves this offseason that I think address a lot of the problems that they had last year. Now, granted, they're going to be in a very easy division this year. The Canadian division last year was fairly easy, but they also had to play, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Jets and, some of the other better teams like the Canadiens.
Yeah.
So having the rest of this division to kind of pound on is going to be good for them, and I think they've addressed a lot of their concerns. They made some moves this offseason, bringing in some defensemen like Nate Schmidt, or second year of Nate Schmidt's contract.
Yeah, didn't they trade Nate Schmidt?
Or did they?
I think they had. I think they ended up trading him because they were paying him a lot of money.
Who am I thinking of? They bought Ekman Larson, right?
That's the big one, yeah.
That's who I'm probably thinking of. Ekman Larson,
one right there.
Yeah, they bought in Ekman Larson to kind of help stabilize things. They have Connor Garland now, who I think is a really, really nice player. Jason Dickinson and Justin Dowling add some depth down to their lineup, and then Thatcher Demko looks like he's ready to take over the reins, and they have Halak to back him up this year after the horrendous kind of season that Braden Holtby had. So,
where did Holtby end up going anyway?
Dallas has 4 goalies. I don't know what they're going to do. They still haven't fixed that. I mean, we're going to talk about them next, but yeah, Dallas has Anton Khudobin, Ben Bishop, Jake Ottinger, and Braden Holtby. You would assume that Bishop's probably going to start the season on IR, but then you still have 3 goalies, so somebody's got to go,
Ben Bishop starting the season on IR is almost a guarantee at this point every year,
Yeah, but
that guy can't seem to stay healthy.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like you're not going to send Jake Ottinger back down to the AHL after what he did for you last year, so I don't know.
There's just no way.
But Calgary, the thing I don't like about Calgary is they didn't really go out of their way to... Nate Schmidt, I think, by the way, the team I was thinking of, I think he went he's on the Jets now. I think that's who...
I think you are right.
But Calgary didn't do enough to address the loss of Mark Giordano, who had been taking steps backwards over the last couple of years, but he still played a very important role on the Calgary Flames. They also didn't address their goal-scoring problems that hurt them last year, and they just didn't really do much of anything to really make me think that we're going to get different results from them this year. So,
yeah, I agree. Calgary seems to be in it's like that old trailer for Far Cry 3, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Calgary at this point is just ramming their head against the wall with the same core of players and expecting something to change when clearly it's not working.
They're just kind of stuck in neutral, and they keep changing. It's weird because they're stuck in neutral, but they keep changing things that I don't think really are impacting that much. They keep changing the coach, but that's like your car being stuck in neutral and you replace the steering wheel.
Exactly. It's oh, well, your transmission still exploded.
Yeah, so I don't know. Not a huge fan of Calgary. Do you think the Pacific's going to be able to take any of the wild cards away from the Central, or do you think it's just going to be the top 3 teams going to the playoffs this year?
The only team I could potentially see sneaking a wild card would be Calgary, but I don't think it's going to happen. I just think the Central is too strong. There's just too many. Even the teams that aren't great in the Central are still good teams,
Yeah, so we'll transition over to the Central actually because this Central division to me very much reminds me of the Metropolitan division in that there's really only one doormat team, which is the Coyotes in this specific division. And really every other team in this division has a reason to believe that they can make the playoffs and be excited about that prospect. There's really like obviously okay, look, the Coyotes are garbage, right? That's by design. They're intentionally tanking, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah,
But
you don't trade away your captain unless you're.
and take on all those contracts from all those teams without they're just accumulating draft picks. They're just like munching draft picks left, right, and center. Um, so my standings predictions: I have the Colorado Avalanche in first, the Winnipeg Jets in second, and the St. Louis Blues as our top three. And my two wildcard teams: I have the Minnesota Wild at fourth, the Dallas Stars at fifth, and then just missing out the Blackhawks at sixth and the Predators at seventh, and then obviously Arizona Coyotes as far into turbo eighth place as you can possibly get.
As many games back of a wild card position as physically possible.
So, what do you think about the Central? What are your standings predictions, and then we'll kind of get into the because this is a very
Um,
stacked division.
I have Winnipeg winning the division just because I think they answered some of the questions with their defense, and if they keep getting goaltending like they got out of Connor Hellebuck, like they're gonna be tough to beat. Colorado is my number two, and I'm not as high on Colorado as I used to be. I really think a lot of the moves in the last couple of years, they're starting to resemble more like the Edmonton Oilers more and more to me. And by that I mean like they're becoming more and more of a glass cannon in a lot of cases. Like they keep shedding players who brought some sandpaper and some grit and keep adding speed and offense when clearly like offense was not their problem.
Right.
So that's more or less like how I feel about them. But it's not to say like I don't think they're obviously still a great hockey team. Like when your top six includes uh one of the best players on the planet, Nathan McKinnon, arguably the second best player in the league, and Mikko Rantanen, who's also a top five player. It's kind of hard to beat.
Yeah, and that's not even to mention Gabriel Landeskog. So,
Exactly. Who you know is important, but doesn't exactly bring the firepower that those other two guys bring. And
so who do you have in your number three spot?
my number three spot, it was tough. I don't really honestly. The rest of the teams in this division, I don't really care for. I think a lot of them are kind of like in the same place. Like Chicago and Minnesota are both young teams with some veteran players in key positions that might make a really startling run. St. Louis, St. Louis is a team that just based on its pedigree might be able to do something because their defense and their forward core is still really good. I'm not sold on that goaltending. Jordan Bennington continues to prove that like he really isn't the guy we thought he was.
He's kind of a
And
basket
Dallas
case.
and Dallas is just like weird because they went from being a Stanley Cup contender, like in the Stanley Cup final, to being one of the worst teams in the division last year. It was very bizarre. So the way I'm looking at the rest of this division, honestly, is like the teams three through four, like three through five, realistically could be any number of St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas, and Chicago, and either four of those teams. The only teams I really don't think can make the playoffs are Nashville and Arizona, and for the obvious reasons you said about for Arizona. And Nashville shed a lot of big contracts and key players on the defensive core. And let's be honest, UC Saros literally carried them that entire second half into the playoffs. Like he literally looked them in the face and was like, "Hop on, boys, let's get in the playoffs." Because he was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a foregone conclusion, but it would be very shocking to see the Avalanche miss the playoffs in any way, shape, or form. Sure, you lose Philip Grubauer, but you pick up Darcy Kemper, who's secretly been one of the best goalies in the NHL over the last 3 seasons on a very terrible Arizona Coyotes team. So I think that's pretty much a lateral move, honestly. I think Grubauer and Kemper arguably are of relatively similar skill levels. The defense continues, like you said, kind of get not weaker in a sense that they're picking up players that can still play, but I mean, you trade away Some of your
They essentially
only.
won 6 Kale McCarrs on the team. This is what it seems like lately.
Well, they traded Ryan Graves to the Devils, and Graves was one of the only players on that defensive core besides Eric Johnson who had any meat on his bones. He was one of the only players that was big and scary to play against. Eric Johnson is really the only defenseman there that I would say is physically punishing, and it's kind of odd to see them go in that direction after so obviously having that be an issue for them against the Golden Knights. I mean, I don't know what series they were watching, but I watched a series where the Avalanche couldn't get out of their own zone because their defenseman couldn't get out and skate out with the puck because they were getting physically beat in the corner every time. You can being able to skate and shoot is all well and good, but if the forecheck is killing you as hard as it was against them last year, you need a little bit of size. You need some muscle to help get the puck out. But they seem just to be hell bent on the Toronto method, which is just score all the time, or the
Well, that's what
Oilers
I was just
method.
gonna say, which is like you've watched the Toronto Maple Leafs struggle with this specific issue. How many times in the last, like how many years in a row have they been knocked out of the playoffs specifically because of this issue? Like their defense isn't up to the task, you know? So it's like, okay, you had a team that was young and upstart, surprised a lot of people a couple of years ago. Like, let's not lie about it. Like, they caught a lot of teams off guard, and then they proved that that wasn't the only reason they were winning games. They were good, but then you go and shed guys like Zadorov and like you said, Ryan Graves over the last couple of years. You let Nazem Kadri go. It's a lot of guys. Unless granted, Kadri's a whole other set of issues. But like my point being, Kadri, when he's in check and playing hockey and not trying to murder players, plays with sandpaper and brings like that edge and is a defensively responsible player. And I just feel like Colorado's getting less and less of them and more guys that they think can skate and score. And it's like, but you don't need four scoring lines. Look at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay won back-to-back Stanley Cups with three really good scoring lines and a fourth line that just went out there to raise hell and muck it up. And they won two Stanley Cups doing it. Like, it's not rocket science. Like, the league, it's funny. Like, the NHL is a copycat league, like most sports leagues, right? Like, the team that starts to have the most success with a certain kind of style, you'll see a lot of teams adopt that. But, like, this is like a weird backwards version of that where teams are adopting, like, the styles from teams that aren't working, that they are trying to, like, what is that called? Like, logical dissonance or whatever, cognitive dissonance. Like, they're trying to just, like, will their way to victory when it's being completely disproven every time they try it. They're like, no, 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 I know it works, and it's like, but it just look at Toronto. Like, just look at Toronto, and it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto hasn't won a playoff series with their current iteration. Neither have the Edmonton Oilers. The last series they won, you have to go back to when Cam Talbot was on the team. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is, look, the regular season really doesn't matter ultimately. Like,
Once the playoffs start, no.
like a lot of the greatest regular season teams of all time, nobody really cares all that much about. I mean, not to kind of pick on the Rangers, but do we talk about the 70s Rangers more or the 94 team more? You know?
Or the '94 team because they won the Stanley Cup, But it's
Which
also
is not
like
to
we
take
don't.
away from the 70s team at all, but
No, I know what you're saying, but it's also like think about the '62 win Tampa Bay Lightning. We don't talk about them because we're like, wow, look, they won 62 games. We're like, wow,
yeah.
look at the big chumps they were. They won 62 games and then lose four straight and get knocked out of the playoffs. Like,
Like, can you tell me who won the President's Trophy in, like, 2010? Like, just right off the top of your head? Because I can't.
well, yeah, it was the Canucks.
Was it 2011 when they won the?
I think the Canucks won three straight President's Trophies. It was like 2010, 2011, and 2012, and they only went to the Stanley Cup final the one time.
Yeah.
They played the Hawks in the conference final that year. I remember that. And then people tried being like, the Hawks and the Canucks have a rivalry. I'm like, they played one playoff series. Like, no, they don't.
But I bet you anything that people would be able to tell you off the top of their head who won the 2010 Stanley Cup.
Oh yeah, bro. Well, that's it. That's kind of,
It's just like, oh, who
when
won
you
the
win it
2010
all.
Stanley Cup? The Blackhawks. Like
Exactly.
I bet most people probably couldn't tell you who won the 2015, President Trophy. You probably can. Or was that the year the Rangers won it? No.
Yeah, it was 2015.
Yeah.
2014 was the year they went to the Stanley Cup final.
But it's like, oh, hey, who won the 2011 or 2012 Stanley Cup playoffs? It's like, oh, yeah, the Kings. Like, that's my point, right? We should not be building teams for the regular season because, great, what does it get you? A pat on the back and a ticket to the playoffs, and you get bounced in the first round and everybody laughs at you. Like,
Exactly. You just look like a bunch of morons. Like,
so it's weird that the Avalanche are going that direction. And then conversely, I think it's a really good thing that the Jets are looking at their defense and saying, okay, we need players. Who do we need? We need defensive defensemen. They go out and get players that are actually going to be able to give a little bit of a break to guys like, Connor Hellebuck, who, for better or for worse, has really kind of been carrying this team over the last 2 years. But they go out and they get Brendan Dillon, who's one of the more reliable defensemen in the NHL. They go out and get Nate Schmidt, who's a really solid two-way defenseman. They've been promoting Logan Stanley up the roster, who, by the way, guess what? Logan Stanley is 6'7", 228. Like...
yeah, no, Winnipeg. Well, I mean, and you can see Winnipeg's been doing this for the last couple of years. Like their front office has been slowly trying to address this, and I think this year was just finally where like the gates blew wide open for them. Like teams just couldn't afford to hold on to these guys in the second straight year of a flat cap.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys ended up just like flooding the market, and Winnipeg was just like, rubbing their hands together maniacally, like, oh, here it is, like this is our shot. Because we've been saying it for the last 2 or 3 seasons that like Winnipeg really is only a couple pieces away from being like a really dangerous team every night. Like their top six is really good, their bottom six is decent, and their goaltending is elite. So if they manage to get like their serviceable defense to like an above average defensive core, I really don't see a lot of teams being able to stand up to them. We saw it through the Vegas Golden Knights' first year in the league when they went to Stanley Cup final. Like Winnipeg, when they had a complete roster, which was most of this top six, honestly, probably most of this top nine, and some of these young defensemen, like they were formidable. Like I thought they should have won the Stanley Cup that year. They were so good.
Yep. I agree. The Blues, to me, kind of had a weird season last year. Obviously, we're still kind of wondering whether or not Tarasenko is going to be on this roster come opening night. Still have to see what goes on with that. But they did pick up Pavel Buchnevich, who's a really good top six piece. I think he's solid for them. I do have some questions about the Wild. I think this is going to be the year that tells us a lot about Minnesota. This is really going to tell us who they are, because last year, Kirill Kaprizov comes out of the gate flying. Everyone's kind of shocked. Cam Talbot plays way above water for a long time.
And then Capo Kakinen comes in and it's just like elite out of nowhere.
Yeah, like we knew he was a good prospect, but he really came out on fire. I think this year in a division where people are expecting the Wild to be better, they're expecting a good team. They're going to bring a little bit of a different game plan this year. Not to mention the Wild did lose some pieces. Ryan Suter's out the door. Zach Parise's out the door. This is going to tell us a lot about who they are as a team. I think that they're going to be good in the regular season just on the virtue of their scoring. Does that translate into playoff success? Maybe not. But I think this is going to tell us a lot about who they are. Dallas, I think, just needed to be healthy last year. I think if you look at their record, they lost something crazy like 13 games in overtime or something like that.
Yeah, it was something absurd.
And to me, a lot of that just read as, okay, they just needed that one extra goal. And who would have scored that one extra goal? Well, probably would have been Sagan, probably would have been Radulov, probably would have been Guryanov, but all of these guys missed extensive time last year. Sagan didn't play basically at all. Radulov played very minimal. I think the Dallas Stars being healthier, picking up a couple pieces like Ryan Suter, will be a good team this year. Will they be good in the playoffs? That's another question.
I forgot they got Ryan Suter.
I do want to ask you, because this is a team that I had a very hard time keeping outside of the playoff picture. But I do want to get your opinions on the Chicago Blackhawks, because they had one of the more interesting off seasons this past off season. not only picking up Marc-Andre Fleury, but they picked up Seth Jones, and we got news that Jonathan Toews, although likely won't start the season, looks like he probably will play at some point. So what do you think about the Blackhawks this year?
I think the real thing with the Blackhawks this year is they themselves can't buy into the hype because let's be honest, there's a lot of hype now because you don't go out and get a guy like Seth Jones to not try and make the playoffs, you know. But the real thing is they have to realize like it's more about staying the course now for them than it is trying to do anything drastic to make the playoffs, you know. I think them bringing in guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and obviously Seth Jones are going to be huge helps because, I mean, Seth Jones, in my opinion, is a top, if not a top five, a top 10 defenseman in the league. And he's only,
Easily.
what, 25?
Yeah, he's nuts.
So it's not like they added an old man, but by the same token, like, Fleury's not young. He's 39. So who knows how much gas is realistically left in the tank for Marc-Andre Fleury? And I'm not rooting against the guy. Like I love the Flower. I think everybody does because he's just he's a likable guy, you know. But
Yeah,
the reality of the situation is he's got a lot of miles on him. He's got a lot of wear and tear on his body, especially over the last couple of years. He's been hurt on and off. So, and the other thing is I really still don't love that defensive core. I mean, they traded away Duncan Keith. Brent Seabrook is a contract dump for some teams, so they can stay on under the cap with long-term injured reserve. Like, they're young. There's going to be a lot of growing pains, and one man does not make a team. You know, like Seth Jones being on that defensive core does not instantly make them like a great defensive team. I still think they have some great veterans up front. You know, like you're not going to bet against a guy like Patrick Kane who could easily score 100 points again this year and only seems to get better the closer he gets to 40. So they have some good players. They have good young players. They have some good veterans, but I still think that it's too iffy, man. Like, I, they could make the playoffs, but I don't think they're realistically going to do any damage if they do. You know, like they might be a one and done team, which is fine for where they are now because they're rebuilding. Like they just need to make the playoffs if that's really their goal and that's really the direction they're pulling in now. You know.
I think a lot of people are going to look at the team and say, well, look how much damage they did last year when they didn't have Taze or Kirby Doc and he was hurt the whole year and they only were starting Kevin Lankinen, and that's all well and good. But I think realistically, you can't look at a lot of what happened last year in the regular season because it was a very insular regular season. And this division, first of all, the division is crazy. I think if they were in a Pacific division, they would have a legitimate chance at being in the top three. But just by virtue of having to play all these other teams as much as they do, it's going to be tough for them. And I do agree that I do like a lot of what's going on in the top six. I mean, I can't wait to see, ostensibly, it will be Kirby Doc probably centering Patrick Kane while Jonathan Toews is still kind of easing his way back in. I can't wait to see the two of them play together, which is going to be crazy. I think they're going to score a ton of goals, but that defense, like you said, I pretty much very much agree with what you said. It's still questionable to a certain extent, and on nights when you don't have Fleury in net, can Kevin Lankinen repeat what he did last year? I'm not a guy that buys into the hype of first-year goaltenders really that often, because I think it's really when there's something to be said for coming into the league and riding that high and just playing white hot every night. I think the second and third years specifically of a goaltender's career really kind of tells you who they are and what they're going to be. And can Kevin Lankinen repeat that? Who knows? If he's not available to go, you still have Malcolm Subban, who's a serviceable backup, but is he going to give you that 75% backup win rate that you're probably going to need in this division to make the playoffs? That's another question entirely. There's just a lot of pieces. The puzzle is almost complete, and you can actually see the picture that the puzzle is painting, but there's still enough pieces that you can't say the puzzle's done. It's getting there, but I don't know. I think the division is just too good, to be quite honest with you.
It's just too it's not like 2010 when the Blackhawks were in kind of a similar position. They were young. They had a lot of young players. They had some key veterans in good positions and some good veteran goaltending. But like, you're not going to win a Stanley Cup with mediocre goaltending anymore. It just doesn't happen, you know? So, and that's not to say that like that's what's happening here, but my point more or less is like you can't have a piece of your team only be okay and be competing for a Stanley Cup anymore, especially not with how good the parity in the league is anymore. Like you have to have four good lines and six good defensemen. And while the Blackhawks are making great strides to get those things, they're not exactly there yet. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know? They don't think about where they were 2 years ago. Like the fact that we're even considering them in the playoff conversation is kind of incredible considering a couple of years ago we were expecting them to be almost as bad as Detroit, you know? Like we were expecting them to have to bottom out still.
Yeah, so I think it's getting there. It's just not there quite yet. Um, so we'll jump over to the Eastern Conference. We'll start with the Atlantic Division before we come all the way over to the East Coast for the Metro Division. My standings predictions for the Atlantic Division, I have the Florida Panthers winning the division with the Lightning in second, the Leafs in third, the Bruins in fourth, snagging one of the wild card spots, the Canadiens in fifth, the Senators in sixth, the Red Wings in seventh, and the Buffalo Sabres in eighth. And this division very much reminds me of the Pacific in that there's a lot of doormats in this division. And I don't look, if I'm calling your team a doormat, it's no disrespect to your team. It's just kind of the reality of the situation where, let's be honest here, there's a lot of not very good teams in this division. Specifically, when you looked at that fifth team that was supposed to be competitive, the fifth team was supposed to be the Montreal Canadiens. Now you have no Shea Weber. Now you have no Carey Price, who, by the way, we just want to wish good luck in his journey through whatever issues he's working through with the players' assistance program. We're not quite sure what that deal is there, but whatever demons or issues that he's facing, we want to wish him all the best going forward with that. But then you get back to the business side of hockey, and no Carey Price, no Shea Weber for the Canadiens. They're no Philip Deneau, no Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Kind of a doormat, so.
Definitely not the team that went to the Stanley Cup final last year, that's for sure.
I'm not thrilled with the Canadiens, who were really supposed to be that fifth team to push the division up, and you end up with four really not great teams. Again, no disrespect to the Red Wings or the Senators. They're trending in the right direction, I think, especially the Senators. Buffalo Sabres are still a dumpster fire. That's besides the point.
Yeah, that's just going to stay that way, though, I think.
So, what are your predictions for this division?
This one's tough because, like you said, like I'm not sold on a lot of these teams. Like you said, like Montreal was supposed to be the next team to like be competitive, but without Carey Price, I don't think losing Kakaniemi is really that big of an issue. But losing Carey Price hurts. I don't care who you are, what team you are. Losing a goaltender who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest goaltender you've ever had,
Yeah.
second to maybe only
Patrick
Patrick Waugh, who's probably the greatest of all time. Like, it's tough. And losing Deneau is going to be a big one. I mean, losing Deneau and Kakaniemi at the same time, which is almost unthinkable because Kakaniemi was supposed to be the guy that replaces Deneau. And I get why they didn't match it. I wouldn't have matched it either. I mean, I'm not going to pay the guy $6.5 million to play on my third line.
Right.
So it's tough for them. But when it comes down to it, like Toronto's going to make the playoffs, I think. Tampa Bay is easily going to make the playoffs. Florida, I think, is going to make the playoffs. I think last year was their coming out party. Boston was really the question mark for me. It was really a toss of whether Boston was going to make it at all or not.
I almost didn't put them in, to be honest with you.
Their defense is still young. It's still growing, You still have guys like McAvoy who are growing into the position that they've been put into. And then you have guys like... Then you don't even know if Tuukka Rask is going to be ready. Like, you have no idea what's going on with that guy, You lose... You lose David Krejci, which I was actually very surprised about. I thought David Krejci had a lot of gas left in the tank, but He wanted to go home, so you can't fault him for that. The guy wanted to go back to his family.
Right.
And so it leaves a lot of holes. It's funny. It's finally like we keep saying this all the time, but it's like, is this finally the year that the water breaks in the Boston Bruins and the bottom falls out? Because let's be honest, they've been pushing this window. They've extended their window a lot over the last 10 years. I mean, they've been the most competitive team arguably since 2010. They've been one of the only teams to like realistically be in the playoffs every year and with a serious threat to do damage every year. But now I think we're finally seeing that fade as, they guys get older, they retire, they lose them. I mean, sure you still have the perfection line, but Patrice Bergeron's 35. Uh, Brad Marchand's like 34. And David Pastrnak, sure, he's only 23 or 24, but when two-thirds of the line is north of 30, it's not exactly the blueprint for sustainability.
Yeah.
So I'd be worried if I were them just in that respect. And overall, it's just I don't know. It's the Atlantic Division actually for once looks a lot doesn't look as tough as it used to. Ottawa's a doormat and that they're not going to make the playoffs, but I still think Ottawa's going to be way more competitive than people are giving them credit for. I think Detroit's going to surprise a lot of teams to be a little more competitive than people give them credit for. I mean, their goaltending isn't terrible. They have Thomas Greiss back there, and he's more than serviceable. I mean, you saw what he did with the Islanders, and you have a lot of young guys in the Detroit team who've been in the league a couple of years now, looking to take big steps. Robbie Fabry's not there anymore. No, yeah, he is. Yeah, right. They got Robbie Fabry. Robbie Fabry's looking to take a big step forward. Dylan Larkin needs to return to form. I mean, you have guys like Tyler Bertuzzi who've been taking some big steps. So, Moritz Seider. So Detroit looks like they're poised to be like trending in the right direction, but by no means are they going to make the playoffs this year at all.
No.
And Buffalo is. I mean, I'm amazed Buffalo hasn't been sued yet, honestly, for the way they've been treating Jack Eichel. Like, I'm amazed he hasn't like
I'm
reached
amazed
out.
the NHLPA hasn't sued him.
I mean, can we talk about the Jack Eichel thing? Because, like, I mean, I think it's pertinent, right? Like, it's going to impact the Buffalo Sabres season.
It's gonna impact
On like
somebody's season because somebody's gonna get him. I cannot see Jack Eichel still being a Buffalo Sabre more than a month or two into the season. I'm shocked that he's still on that team now, and we know why. It's because the Sabres are holding him hostage because nobody wants to pay the price that they want him to because he still has to get the surgery, which means he would still miss a couple months after that. And they're asking some ridiculous, king's ransom.
It's like two first round picks, like a blue chip prospect and like a roster player. It's like what, for a guy that I'm not even going to be able to have for like 3 months after he gets his neck.
And
It'd be one thing if
like,
Buffalo had let him get the surgery. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And he was healthy.
I want to just point out, I'm not saying that Jack Eichel's not worth the king's ransom because he absolutely is. Jack Eichel, in my opinion, is on a competent team, easily an 80-plus point player, more than likely upwards of 90. He's just that fucking good. But when you're asking a team to pay a king's ransom for a guy that they're not going to have for 3 months into the season, if you trade for him now, you might get him back a month and a half to 2 months in, and that's if his PT and physical therapy goes well. That's asking a lot for a guy that's hurt.
And it's also asking a lot because surgery on his spine. Like there's no linear recovery on things like that. You just never know. And that's not saying he shouldn't get it or anything, right? I'm obviously not advocating. I think Jack Eichel, like, if it's going to help him both on the ice and in his personal life, then yeah, he should get it.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's been proven. The Buffalo Sabres argument is so flimsy too because they keep arguing that's never been done on a hockey player before. And it's like, okay, fine. It's never been done on a hockey player before. But it's been done on thousands of other people who have all gone on to have perfectly normal lives. So, like, your argument that, like, you're worried it's going to damage your investment makes almost no sense. Because clearly it's working. And if you're really worried about protecting your investment, wouldn't you want to take the chance on something like this where you could, I don't know, potentially ruin his career or his life? Like...
This has been, and not to mention also, by the way, This has been a masterclass in how to ruin your franchise for at least like 10 years. Because if you think any big free agent who maybe has a history of injury wants to go anywhere near this organization after that, you are out of your mind. It was
Especially
already
after what
like,
Robin Leonard said about their team in his
yeah,
tweets and stuff. Like the fact that like they have not even a team doctor, just some guy who's hired by the team handing out benzos and stuff. Like that's an
yeah.
organization I don't want to go anywhere near.
It was
Like,
hard enough to get people to go there to begin with, okay?
well, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, come up to our city that's frozen under ice half the year, you know?
And do you like any guy who is like realistically even considered the possibility that he might need some kind of surgery in the future, or even just somebody who's injury prone is gonna want to be anywhere in the general vicinity of the city ever? Like the only thing
No,
that's ever gonna restore this organization's credibility is literally nuking it top to bottom. You new ownership, a new owners, a new board of directors, new coach, new assistant coach, new everything, new GM. Everybody's got to go, and
it's got to be
that's
a clean
like,
house.
and that's nothing against, because I know that they just hired a new coach and they just hired a new GM. It's nothing against them specifically. They're just going to be a victim of circumstance. But you don't want any ties at all to the old regime. None.
None. No, especially not when it's, the thing that people are going to remember about that old regime is the fact that they screwed their star player.
I
Like
it's
they've driven how many guys out of town? They lost Sam Reinhart. They ruined Sam Reinhart, in my opinion.
I'm
That
excited
kid
to
had,
see him on Florida though. I will say that.
oh, 100%. That kid had all the talent in the world. He deserved, all the chances he got, but every time he essentially was expecting a bowl of cornflakes every morning and they just gave him a pile of shit.
They
And they were expecting him to do something with it. It's the same thing they did to Jack Eichel.
they almost
Jack
forced
would be like,
Ryan O'Reilly to retire.
Ryan O'Reilly hated his life.
Yeah, he almost just straight up quit hockey over it.
Like he went from like being one of the best young two-way centers in the league to what people consider one of the biggest busts for a couple of years there to being a Stanley Cup champion. Like if that's not an indictment on your franchise, I don't know what the fuck is, bro. Like if a guy literally can come out and say your organization almost made me hate hockey and almost ruined my love of the sport. I don't know if there's any coming back from that, honestly.
No, and for those reasons, they're my pick, by the way, to end up bottom of the league. They're going to be the worst team in the league, in my opinion. Um,
Who do they even hire as their new coach? I don't even know. Because it just
I
seems
can
like there's a
see
new coach
his
every
face.
6 months.
Is it Lindy Ruff?
I hope it's not. No, Lindy Ruff's still in New Jersey.
Oh, he's in New Jersey, right? I can see his Don Granato. That's who it is.
Okay.
I just, it sucks.
Listen, it's nothing personal against him. It's just like, at some point, you gotta just start over. Like, just tear it down and start over, Like, obviously something's not working. Like, very obviously something is not working in Buffalo.
I mean, to kind of soothe Buffalo Sabres fans, to pick on my own team for a little bit here, there's a reason why the New York Islanders didn't turn around the way they did until we had new ownership, until John Ledecky took over and got Brett Yormark's stupid dumbass out of the team. There's a reason that Scott Malkin and John Ledecky turned the team around the way they did. New ownership, new blood. They went out and said, all right, no more internal promotions. We're not jerking around anymore. We're going out and getting pedigree. Bam, we hire Lou Lamoriello. Bam, you hire Barry Trotz. Bam, you hire Mitch Korn. Barry Trotz brings a lot of his coaching staff in. We essentially had a scrubbing from almost top to bottom of the Islanders organization, and there's a reason why it worked. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Islanders were not really that much better off than the Sabres before Lou Lamoriello got here. But look where we are now.
The other thing is, it's like sometimes you just need somebody coming from outside the organization because the people that are inside are too close. They're not gonna critique their own work.
They're not going to rock the boat.
Like, they've been working for, God, John Smith for how many years and rising through the ranks with John Smith. Of course, their hockey philosophy is really not going to be that different from John Smith. So you just keep hiring the same. You're essentially hiring the same guy over and over and over again. And then the one time you go out of your comfort zone, you go to Europe and get Ralph Kruger, who, let's be honest, his track record in the NHL was pretty terrible. His track record in European and international hockey is really good, but there might as well be two different sports.
Oh
North
yeah.
American hockey is nothing like European or international hockey. It's not. The rink isn't even the same fucking size. So, like, don't tell me that you thought Ralph Kruger was going to come over here and light the league on fire and do something crazy. Because I could have told you that wasn't going to work. Did I think it was a good idea, though, to try to bring somebody in who's been away from the NHL for a while? Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, but at that point, you're a young team. Why would you go with a coach who's kind of better, whose track record's shown he's better with veteran and prime age players, instead of just going to the NCAA and getting a developmental coach? Like, you're not going to be winning anyway, so who cares? At this point, you're just trying to teach them how to play the game right. You're trying to break bad habits. You're trying to teach them defensive responsibility, and you're trying to adjust them to the speed and responsibility, and decision making that has to happen at an NHL level. So why not just hire a fucking developmental coach? Why go through all these guys who you keep saying are going to bring accountability? They're going to bring this. They're going to bring that. And it's like, that's not even what you need, because you're not even going to be competitive. Who cares?
Not to mention the irony of the whole situation is that your organization is not even accountable for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, your owner is corrupt, and your GM and has been holding your star player hostage. So who's holding them accountable? Like,
Exactly.
I think, and that really does translate, in my opinion. I think that's why a lot of these kids, like Alex Nylander and Sam Reinhart and Ristolainen, have really kind of struggled in Buffalo, because they are waking up every morning, they're putting on a jersey, and they're looking at their head coach, who's probably different from the head coach they had last year, and the head coach is saying,
Quite different
well,
from the head coach they had yesterday.
exactly. They're saying you need to be professional. You need to be a hockey player. You need to be accountable. And they're looking at them and saying, well, the Pagulas haven't been, accountable since like the late '80s, and you're holding my captain hostage. And by the way, you just took his captaincy off of him, which obviously last year, he was still the captain, but they were probably looking at him when he was injured and saying, oh, well, Eichel's out, and he told us that he wanted to get this surgery, because we knew about this last year. We knew he wanted the surgery last year.
Well,
So,
yeah,
like,
that's why I don't understand why it's still an issue now.
like, are you as like a third or fourth line player for the Buffalo Sabres going to be motivated to represent this Buffalo Sabres organization when they themselves are being made out to be an absolute clown show on the grand stage of the National Hockey League? You're getting the hell out of there as soon as you can.
100%.
It's just a joke, and it really makes me very angry, because they're taking what should be a transcendent talent, a guy that should be on national TV as often as possible, a man that should be playing in the playoffs every single season, an absolute joy and a treat to watch on the ice, and they're just digging the nail in his back every single day, and it's a joke. It really, really is. Like,
And it's not even that. It's like, as a Buffalo Sabre fan, right? Why am I going to support an organization who regularly spits in my face? Like, not even to mince words, they literally spit in their face every chance they get.
yeah.
They get Jack Eichel, one of the best players in the league, could be one of the best players, could be arguably one of the greatest Buffalo Sabres of all time. We're going to hold him hostage and drive him out of town. Like, if you're Rasmus Dahlin, right, who was the first transcendent talent they got, why are you going to even try when all you're going to get is ridiculed and blamed and then driven out of town by the Pagulas? Like, what's the point?
That's what they did to Ristolainen.
It's just like, well, what's the point? Like, they almost ruined Robin Leonard's career, because, like, people forget, but Robin Leonard was like a top goaltending prospect for the Ottawa Senators before he got sent to Buffalo.
Yeah.
So it's like, Buffalo is a place where careers go to die. Coaches, general managers, and players all together. That is a black hole. Like, and it needs to be fixed. And whether that's the league stepping in and mandating things to them themselves, I don't know. But they got to do something, because this can't go on, man. Like, it's almost as embarrassing as the Arizona Coyotes saga. And at least the Arizona Coyote saga wasn't dysfunction on the ice and dysfunction from within the organization. It was dysfunction from outside the hockey world. It was dysfunction with their owners, dysfunction with the city, dysfunction with this and that. But the team ran pretty well. I mean, they had a pretty decent following when they first showed up, you know? Like, I guess what I'm saying is Arizona wasn't a Mickey Mouse organization. The Buffalo Sabres are absolutely acting like a Mickey Mouse organization or some third-rate ECHL team, and it's really a stain and a blemish on the reputation of the NHL.
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of our way of kind of kicking. I don't know. I don't know who needs to be kicked in the pants, whether it's Gary Bettman, the Board of Governors, or the NHLPA. Somebody needs to be kicked in the pants to kind of kickstart things. And I don't want to kind of wash over the rest of the Atlantic Division, but I think, like we said, it's kind of the Pacific where there's not a whole lot to talk about because you have some really good teams. The Florida Panthers are a team I'm actually super excited to watch this year. The Lightning are the Lightning. Even though they lost a lot of their depth, they're still a really, really good team. Maple Leafs are always good in the regular season. You know, the Bruins, like we talked about, the Bruins are really the only question mark. There's not really a lot to talk about there. And, you know, we will be talking about these teams as the regular season goes on. But right now, yeah, we kind of have 3 really good teams, a question mark in the Bruins, and then 4 kind of doormats. You know?
And the other thing you can't really talk about with those other teams is like Detroit and Detroit is one thing because they didn't do anything. Like
they got
they didn't
Nick Leddy, but they're still very much Detroit and Ottawa are believing in the process, which is a good thing.
right. Like it's a great thing, honestly. The real thing, so there's just not much to say about them, you know, like because and the other thing is like I don't want to there's nothing really to say about that team because like you don't want to shit on them because like they're doing the right thing. Like Steve Yzerman's doing all the right things, so there's no reason us saying like, oh, they're gonna be bad.
Yeah,
Because everybody knows they're gonna be bad. Like, there's nothing. It's not like wow, breaking analysis here. Detroit Red Wings not gonna be good. Like, thanks.
Yeah. So
I think.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
and then I was gonna say with Ottawa, there's really not a lot to say because they still have guys who haven't been signed. Like Brady Tkachuk, I think is still waiting for a contract. So
Yeah.
like. It's just, it's wait and see for them. You don't really know what that roster is even going to look like because there's also guys coming out of their farm system that we've probably have never heard of that might get a shot. So it's like there's just a lot you don't know about these teams that we can't really say until what is it? The tire hits the pavement, but in this case until the skates hit the ice. Like there's not a lot we can really talk about with these guys.
So we will jump over to, in my opinion, the best division in hockey. This division is stupid, and it actually makes me really mad. Just how good this division is. I'm going to talk about the Metro Division, of course. The Metro Division is very much like the Central, where there's one team who I think is clearly not as good as the rest, which is, in this instance, the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then you have 7 teams where, if the cards fall right, realistically, any of these 7 teams could be in the playoffs. So this was a very, very difficult division to predict, so don't take this lightly. But I have the Washington Capitals at number 1. I have the Philadelphia Flyers at number 2. The New York Islanders at number 3. I have the New York Rangers snagging the final wildcard spot at number 4. I have the Hurricanes at 5, the Penguins at 6, and the Devils at 7th. Obviously, the Columbus Blue Jackets at 8th. So give me your kind of take on the division of death, essentially.
Yeah, it really is kind of a crapshoot, huh?
It's a mess. It really, really is.
I mean, see, like this is one where I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have standings for because I could like after looking at these teams, I was like, any way these chips fall could be totally different on just based on like any number of again like it's like any sport, right? Any number of arbitrary factors could factor in and change everything, but it's like in this division's case, it's literally the instance where like half an inch could like in terms of like an experiment, right? Like the half of an inch could change everything. Like one team wins you could lose one game like in January and it could come back and fuck you in April. And like that's how it's gonna be with this division. I think the Washington Capitals might be just be number 1 just because they're relatively the same team. Like they really haven't changed that roster all that much in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, the goaltending's changed here and there, but I think Vanacek.
They
I mean,
literally
Vanacek and Samsonov should be all right this year.
they went out of their way to make sure their goaltender didn't change by trading for Vanacek back from the Kraken after they took him. So
That was, by the way, that was weak. I was like, what? Like, why did you even? Okay, but
um, continue.
there's that. And then, I mean, Philadelphia should be really good. Philadelphia should be fucking awesome.
I mean, they basically have
But
half a new defensive core.
do they still have AV as the coach?
uh,
Because I remember people were like calling for his head. Like they wanted to like parade his head on a spike through
yeah,
through
AV's still
Philadelphia.
the head coach. They went out and got
Yikes.
Rasmus Ristolainen. They went out and got Ryan Ellis,
Ryan Ellis.
Keith Yandel.
They traded away Shane Gostisbehere and Nolan Patrick.
So their defense, by the way, is going to be ridiculous. Like, I'm just going to rattle off the 7 names that I think are going to be on the opening night roster. So you have Justin Braun, Ryan Ellis, Ivan Provorov, Ristolainen, Sanheim, Keith Yandel, and Cam York. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, honestly.
My only worry is that the guys they added aren't necessarily known for being like stalwart defensively, and that was really the thing that came back to bite them. Like it wasn't that they couldn't move the puck. Like they had Ivan Provorov and they still had Shane Gostisbehere and guys that can move the puck pretty well. It was just like they couldn't defend the middle of the ice at all. So now I'm curious to see if like adding a guy like Ristolainen, who granted he's playing in Buffalo, but has kind of developed a reputation as being kind of soft and not like a defense first kind of defenseman. And Ryan Ellis, well, he's competent in his own end and he's good, is kind of undersized. He's only I think like 5'10" or so, but I mean, I don't know. I like to look at the roster a lot. I think didn't they trade away Jacob Voracek?
Yeah, they
Did they
traded
send him back to
Voracek
Columbus?
to Columbus for Cam Atkinson.
That's right. That's weird. Why
I just think
they just
that like Voracek over the last 2 seasons has looked really, really complacent. Like he kind of looked like he was like, yeah, top line locked in, not moving too much. He kind of was looked like almost like lethargic in a lot of ways on the ice.
No, yeah, I'm not saying it's like that getting rid of him was a mistake or nothing. I just think it's interesting they went out and got Cam Atkinson, who also kind of has looked like complacent and lethargic the last couple of years.
They're a very interesting team. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them because of how bad they were last year. But again, when we looked at how bad they were last year, it was a very, very specific problem that they had, which is they weren't defending the center of the ice at all. They went out and got Nate Thompson, who I think is a really solid third center option. You have Sean Couturier, who's a Selke Trophy caliber center. You still have Travis Konechny.
Then you have Claude Giroux, who could play center if he has to.
Scott Lawton is still there. Kevin Hayes is still there. So I think that they're going to take last season. And obviously, we ended up learning towards the end of the regular season that Carter Hart was playing hurt that whole time. So he's been working with not just Philadelphia's goalie coach. He went out and he worked with 2 independent goalie coaches to kind of like get him back to where he needs to be. So I think you take all of that into consideration. I think we're in for a surprise with the Flyers this year. I think that they're going to be better than people think they will. Another question mark, in my opinion, the New York Islanders, I think, could very easily miss the playoffs, if nothing else, but because they're starting the regular season on a 12-game road trip, which is...
Well, that's because your home stadium's not going to be done, right?
Yeah, and the thing that sucks even harder about that is it's not even like we're doing the West Coast sweep. Like, we don't play any of LA, San Jose, or Anaheim during this road trip. So
Really?
we still have to come back home and then go back on that trip later on in the season. Now, obviously, what does that mean? It means towards the end of the regular season, when it's really crunch time and the points are really, really starting to matter, we have a lot of home games coming up. But... at one point we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 9 of 10, 10 of 11 at home in the regular season. So,
Which could be either a curse or a blessing, depending on how well you play at home.
and ironically, we don't do that Western road trip until the end of February, where we go to San Jose, LA, and Anaheim. But I mean, those 12 games, if we come out of the gate flat and we come out with like 5 wins out of those 12 games, that could like put a nail in the coffin really early if other teams come out flying. I want to get your opinion on the Rangers, and I specifically want to get your opinion on the Hurricanes and Penguins. Now, the Devils, I don't want to discount the Devils. They did go out and get Dougie Hamilton. They did go out and get Ryan Graves. I think they did a lot of good this offseason. They're probably going to be without Mackenzie Blackwood every single time they go into Canada because he doesn't want to get the vaccine. So that's an out.
Literally every time he goes into Canada, or literally any time he crosses into New York or any state with a mandate. Yeah.
He literally cannot go to Canada. They will not let him travel to Canada without the vaccine. So he's not available for any of those games, even as backup. So that's kind of an ouch.
It's a big ouch.
I think the Devils did a lot of good things this offseason. They invested really heavily in their team, getting guys like Thomas Tatar and Dougie Hamilton and Ryan Graves. I think if you put the Devils in the Pacific, they'd honestly probably be pushing that third, fourth, or fifth spot. It's not going to happen for them in this division, I don't think. But I do want to get your opinion on the Rangers, the Hurricanes, and the Penguins, because those are three teams that I think are very interesting, and I had a really, really difficult time keeping the Penguins and the Hurricanes out of the playoffs and putting the Rangers in. What do you think about these teams? Like, just, whatever team you want to talk about first, just go off the top.
I agree here that the Penguins are going to miss the playoffs, and that's just because not having Crosby and Malkin for the first couple of months of the season is going to be tough. Like, I don't care who you are, or what team you are, how good you are, losing literally your two best players, like right after one right after the other, is not conducive to success. And you saw it last year. At any one point, they only had one of them in the lineup, and they struggled with how paper thin that lineup was. They also lost Brandon Tanev, I think, right?
Yeah, he went to the Kraken.
Yeah.
I also just don't like. I think the main reason why I kept these team out, because Crosby may play in that first month of the season. Malkin's going to be out at least 2 to 3. And they still have Jeff Carter, but I think we're finally starting to see the cracks in the armor of Tristan Jarry. I mean, he had a horrendous playoff series last year. Let's not beat around the bush. You know what I'm saying? Like,
he was not good.
To put it lightly. I don't like the goaltending. I really don't.
It's almost funny. You think they're kicking themselves like, oh my god, we should have kept Matt Murray,
or oh my god, we should have taken the bullet and traded back for Marc-Andre Fleury when the Vegas Golden Knights were offering him at half of his contract.
For literally half his contract, yeah. I don't know, man. Pittsburgh. I mean, this is just what happens after you've had so much sustained success. Like, eventually the bubble bursts. And it doesn't stay that way forever.
It's super hard to bet against Sidney Crosby, but I think I'm ready to start betting against the Penguins as a whole,
I think it's a little easier to bet against 35-year-old Sidney Crosby than it was to bet against, like, 25-year-old Sidney Crosby, And
it's like, oh, the Penguins won the division last year. Okay. But now they have to play all these other really good teams, and they don't get to just stomp the Philadelphia Flyers every night, because guess what? The Flyers are actually better now, so yeesh.
It's definitely like a tough spot to be in, I think Carolina is going to be good. I think they probably are going to make the playoffs, if I'm being honest. I just think, like, that defensive core is still just so fucking nasty. Like, I'm not going to bet against a team that has Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, and, like, they have Bean, Fleury. Like, they have all these guys that I'm just not going to bet against,
Well, didn't they
might have lost Jake Bean, I think.
Didn't they lose Fleury to the Kraken? Or is that the other
I think
Fleury?
so. I think it was Hayden Fleury, yeah. I think they lost him.
They have Ethan Bear, Ian Cole, Tony DeAngelo, Jake Gardiner, Eric Jelena, Max Lajoie, Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, Slavin, and Brendan Smith. So they have, like, a lot of defensemen that could play. I think it's kind of funny. It seems like in response to losing Dougie Hamilton, they were like, we're just going to sign everyone and just see if we can make him up in the aggregate. Like, we're just going to see what happens.
They also just, like, went out and got a bunch of ex-Rangers, which is really funny to me.
Brendan Smith.
Like, oh, we got
Tony DeAngelo.
Brendan Smith, Tony DeAngelo. Okay, listen, the Tony DeAngelo thing, I don't know why they're giving him a shot.
I can't see that lasting very long. I have a feeling that before too long, I think he's gonna play well in the beginning of the season, and everyone's gonna be like, "Look, he's back." And then, like, as he starts to settle back in, he's just gonna be the Tony DeAngelo we know he is. Where, yeah, okay, he can put up 50 points, but he's a complete liability in his own end. And is it really worth dealing with his off ice nonsense? Probably not.
Over
Actually,
under, he makes like
definitely
a
not.
comment about over under he's vaccinated.
He has to be. I mean, the Hurricanes said that they were the first team to have 100% vaccination. So
Interesting.
he everyone was making jokes about it. They were like, "Does this count, Tony DeAngelo?" So we'll see. But the reason that I kept them out of the playoffs is they're going into the regular season with a lot of moving parts. You know, a completely new goaltending tandem because Nedeljkovic is gone, Mrazek is gone. Which, by the way, just keep your eye on the Toronto Maple Leafs this year because they had Peter Mrazek and Jack Campbell, and I'm not taking away from the skill of either one of those guys, but neither one of them can stay healthy. So whoever the third stringer on the Toronto Maple Leafs is, who might still be Michael Hutchinson, better get his gear ready. Just throwing that out there. If both those guys go down, the Maple Leafs could be in some serious trouble, which is not outside the realm of possibility. They both have like groins made of glass. So, but you know, wait, what was that? Go ahead.
I was gonna say I just don't get like why they went out and got like I understand they wanted to move on from Freddie Anderson and like that's fine. Like I'm not gonna blame you for that. Like you want to move on from the goaltender, whatever, that's your prerogative. But why go and get a guy that can't stay healthy and realistically isn't better? Like you didn't upgrade at all.
No, no, you didn't.
If anything, you made like a lateral move, you know?
Not to mention the fact that Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek are both goalies that very much thrive on playing time. They thrive on being in the groove. They thrive on playing games consistently and regularly, but neither one of them have the body to support that. So are you just going to run one into the ground when he gets hurt, you just run the second one into the ground? Or do you do this thing where like you 50-50 split it to try to keep both guys healthy, but then you run the risk of having them run lukewarm? You know, I don't know.
It's just I don't know. It's a crapshoot, honestly.
You know, Freddie Anderson goes to the Hurricanes. You know, I think Freddie Anderson, the pair of Freddie Anderson and Antti Raanta is actually a really, really good goaltending pair. I like that a lot. But there's just a lot of moving parts here that I don't know are moving in the right direction. I mean, you go out and get Derek Stepan, you go out and get Jesperi Kotkaniemi, you know, you go out and get Stefan Nason. Obviously, like all of the defensemen I just mentioned, Ethan Bear, Ian Cole, Tony DeAngelo, Eric Jelena, Brendan Smith, you know, it just kind of feels like, I said this last year, where I said the Hurricanes to me very, very much feel like a team that is very good. They just need to get slightly better at some key positions and they'll be winning Stanley Cups. You know, maybe get a slightly better second line winger instead of Nino Niederreiter, you know, or get a slightly better second pairing defenseman than Jake Gardiner, a slightly better starting goaltender than Peter Mrazek. You know, nothing crazy, but just slight upgrades here and there, and you'll be winning Stanley Cups. And their response to that instead was to get worse on defense, honestly. I mean, you lose Dougie Hamilton, the top 10 defenseman. You got worse. You know, you can't replace a guy like that. And then they kind of made a lateral move at goaltender, and then they just went and signed like 5 forwards, and it's like, how are you fitting all these guys into your lineup? And also, by the way, none of them are really an upgrade over the guys you had last year.
I just don't get why they lost in the Nedeljkovic. Like, why would you just let him go?
Why trade him when he carried your team into the playoffs last year? Like, hey,
like, oh wow, we finally have a young goaltender who seems to be sustainable, and we traded him.
Sick Calder Trophy, bro. Have fun in Detroit. Okay. Like, thanks.
I mean, like, listen, that's a fucking great trade for the Detroit Red Wings. Like,
absolutely. Are you kidding me? That's a steal. Like Steve
Like, oh,
Eisenman's
we get
friggin'
our
eyes
goaltender
probably
of the
popped out of
future.
his head when he got that phone call.
You
Like,
think he called them, was like, hey, are you guys thinking of moving on from any goaltenders? You know, like maybe we can get Peter Mrazek back, though you want Alex Nedeljkovic? And he was like, yes.
they probably called him, and Eisenman probably like hung up the phone and called back an hour later, thinking it was a prank call. He was gonna be like, "Yo, he calls up the GM of Carolina. He's like, "Yo, you're never gonna." This guy called me, and like he was offering me Alex Nedeljkovic for like a second round pick. He was like, "No, that was me. Yeah, no. Do you want to do it?" It's like, what? Hello?
Like, yes. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Yes.
Yes, click. Just hangs up before he can say no. Just speed dials NHL registry.
Before he even like finishes hanging up the phone, he's already faxed it to the NHL registry so they can't back out. He's like, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this right. Okay.
The Hurricanes are a weird team. Like I said, I think the thing that's gonna hold them back is when I compare them to last year's team and I compare them to other teams in this division, my question was, did they get better? Did they get worse? That's why I think I put the Flyers as high as I did, because they got better. They got demonstrably better. The Capitals and the Islanders, did they get better? Not necessarily. Did they get worse? Not necessarily. I think they're pretty similar. I think the Rangers, talk about, did a team get better? Yeah, obviously. No duh. The Rangers addressed a lot of their problems. But then when you look at the Hurricanes, like, did they get better? On defense, look, then I love Ethan Bear. I think he's a great young defenseman. No disrespect to any of the other guys besides Tony DeAngelo, who I mean all the disrespect in the world to. Besides him, I mean no disrespect to any of the other guys. They're not Dougie Hamilton, and even in the aggregate, I don't think you can replace a 50-point stalwart defenseman like Dougie Hamilton. It's a tall task. And then when you look at the offense, you still have the guys that I wanted you to upgrade, but now you have like a glut at forwards with all of these other players. Like, is Derek Stepan really going to be the third line center you want him to be? Does he play enough defense? Not really, because he's kind of slow. I don't know. There's a lot of shifting sands here in Carolina, and I don't necessarily think they're shifting in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily shifting for the better. I think they made a lot of changes just for the sake of making changes, almost.
Which, I mean, can be a good thing in certain instances where you just need some new blood, but I think with a team that was as close to being over the edge as the Hurricanes were, it's a bad thing. It demonstrates to me a lack of confidence in the team.
I mean, what demonstrated a lack of confidence to me in the team, honestly, was when they were considering firing fucking... They weren't going to extend Rod Brind'Amour. I was like, what? Why not? The guy is clearly, like,
one of the
best coach you've had. He's one of the best coaches in the league, and he's the best coach you've had in God knows how long. And, like, those negotiations dragged on for, like, I don't know how long. They dragged on so long that the Rangers were able to put in a phone call and interview Rod Brind'Amour.
Yeah.
If that were me, honestly, as Rod Brind'Amour, and they were making all these changes and they weren't sure about me, I probably would have left, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just because, like, this is a team that seems like they don't really know what they want to do anymore. Like, they seemed like they had an idea. They had, like a direction they were going in, and then all of a sudden, they bought their own hype, and now they're trying to make moves just for the sake of making moves, almost. Like, I don't think the Kakaniemi thing was really worth it.
It didn't really address a problem. Like, you didn't have a third line center problem, because you had your centers were Aho, Stahl, and Trocheck. I mean, Trocheck was also being moved around the line, but it's like, did you really have a center problem? Not really, like.
Yeah, like, I don't. Like, did I miss something? Like.
So, what do you think about the Rangers this year specifically? I'm very interested to get your take on that.
Well, depending on whether Ryan Reeves' MCL or ACL exploded the other night is really contingent on how I feel about the Rangers. Not really, but I don't know. I think they added a lot of they answered a lot of the questions that people had about them last year. I mean, with how fast the heads rolled in the front office last year, and then with how fast everything happened in terms of the coaching search. I mean, I think they got the right guy. I was advocating for Gerard Gallant for literally every open coaching vacancy. I was like, this guy deserves a job.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the job opened up for the Rangers, I was like, no, 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 no one else should hire him. No, 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 I want him. You come to New York, please, save my franchise. Um, but I mean, if anything, I have seen a couple of preseason Ranger games. Like, I don't watch a lot of preseason, but I watched the first preseason game, and then I watched the one of the ones the other night. I think I watched the one against the Islanders where they shit on the Rangers. But the thing that was encouraging was Capo Caco looks more confident, Alexis Lafreniere looks more confident, and the defense looks to only be getting better, right? You know, you add Patrick Nemeth, who's not like a top two, top four guy, but he's a solid, sturdy, bottom six penalty killing defenseman, which is exactly what the Rangers needed. Um, Guys like Nils Lundqvist look like they're ready to make the jump. I mean, the kid's been skating great in camp. He scored a bunch of goals in the rookie camp and the rookie tournament he played in with the Rangers. I mean, Zibanejad looks better. He looks like he's actually like ready to go this year. I mean, he's got a couple of goals in preseason. Panarin is just Artemi Panarin. Like, there's just no other way to describe it. That guy's the best player on the team every single night. My question mark with the Rangers, which is the same question mark I have with them every year, almost every year anyway, is consistency. Rangers need to be consistent because there are some stretches where they play like absolute gangbusters and are the best team on the ice every night, and then a couple days later they come back out and they look like they don't even know how to play hockey anymore. And I think that's really going to be a big thing with them this year because if they can't stay consistent, there's no way they're making the playoffs in this division.
No.
There are no mulligans anymore, you know. Last year, with the way the divisions were set up, you could lose a couple, and then you'd have a set against a team like Philadelphia where you knew you could go in and just shell them for like 3 wins, you know.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
You don't really have that anymore. Because teams like, I mean, like we said, every team in this division for the most part is fairly competitive. Even the teams that I don't think are going to make the playoffs, like the Devils, are still going to be tough. Are going to be tough wins every night. Like that's going to be a team that's going to come at you and come at you hard.
I mean, even the Blue Jackets, as much as I don't think they're really going to compete, are not as much of a doormat as the Coyotes, the Sharks, or the Sabres, for example.
No, not by any stretch.
It's crazy. This division scares me. I think the reason that I'm confident in the Rangers this year, I was confident in them last year, but I think the reason I'm confident in them this year is because they've made key additions at certain spots, such as adding that top six defensive defenseman role. You know, you add a couple of bruising guys like Barclay Goodrow, Sammy Blais, Ryan Reeves, address a lot of the problems they had last year. And I think, you know, Shesterkin has proven that he's ready to face a full-fledged regular 82-game season, along with Alexander Georgiev, which that's going to be a whole other thing. We're going to see where he goes, you know, potentially at the end of this year. I think his contract is up this year or next year. But I think the Rangers have one of the better goaltending duos in the division, and I think they addressed a lot of the problems. And as opposed to a lot of other teams in the division, I can say, yes, the New York Rangers addressed their issues and got better, as opposed to some of the other teams in the division who did not address their problems and arguably got worse. So
Right.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. Do you have any last thoughts on any of these divisions before we kind of wrap up things?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be exciting though this year. I think it's going to be definitely a different type of season than we've been used to seeing because finally it's back to a full 82 games starting on time.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know everyone's excited. Way too early. Gonna be completely irrelevant in 10 games into the season. What's your Stanley Cup matchup? Just throw it out there. Just way too early, completely irrelevant, not gonna matter. Because
Probably it's tough. Trying to, because I don't think Tampa Bay gets back there again.
I'll help you out a little bit. Mine is Winnipeg, Florida. I think that's gonna be the Stanley Cup.
I was gonna
matchup.
say the Jets myself. The Eastern Conference is so tough, though, is really the issue. Like, I'm trying to think of like what teams coming out of these divisions. It's like
I'm gonna say
I'm gonna
Jets
go with
Panthers, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna say Jets Panthers. I'm gonna say Jets in 7.
interesting. Okay, I'm gonna go with Jets and I guess I'll go with the okay, let's go some spicy with the Philadelphia Flyers. I think they're gonna be better than they were last year. I don't know if they're gonna make I don't know if they're gonna make Stanley Cup final, but you know what? With that decor, anything's possible at this point.
So who's winning that series?
Let's say Winnipeg Jets, and I'm gonna say they do it in 6 games.
So you heard it here first, folks. The Jets are going to win Stanley Cup, except for the fact that probably halfway through the season we're going to be talking about what went wrong and why the Jets are bad. Um,
Usually,
and
what happens.
our picks will be completely irrelevant. So look forward to both of our standings predictions being completely wrong because that's just the way the puck goes. So um, from here on out, it's going to be our weekly content. So every week, starting with next week during the start of the regular season, maybe a little bit of a shorter episode since it's only going to be like 2 or 3 games have gone by at that point. Maybe we'll do like just kind of general what you're looking forward to, regular season kind of thing. Um, but yeah, so starting next week, we'll be doing our weekly episodes, and it's going to be interesting. So let us know what you guys think down in the comments or on Twitter. And yeah, so I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again next time.